methods, and so significantly that many of the market leaders abandoned their previous attempts and started favoring deep learning as their core method. And that actually resulted in the acquisition of DeepMind. $600 million, I think back then sounded like an enormous amount. In today's AI world and the businesses that are being built at the moment, it's a drop in the ocean. So they definitely saw something that had massive potential long before a lot of the rest of the market did. Today, DeepMind's chinchilla scaling law is extremely influential in all of the state-of-the-art AIs that we currently use. And the model, in simple terms, comes down to just two principles. So the first principle of the chinchilla scaling law, it's a very strange name, I know. If you provide an AI model with an enormous amount of compute power, an enormous amount of data, and let it process through the data over a long enough period of time, normally anywhere from a couple of months to a year, it becomes extremely smart. So many people think that AI is something that is built. That's actually a misconception. AI is not built, it is grown. So the right recipe, effectively, of compute and data, the model is essentially a training bot itself, will process through that at incredibly high speed, consumes the information, and then builds patterns in a kind of digital neural network. And these patterns are what allow it to become intelligent. Unfortunately, and it's one of the risks that we'll talk about a little bit later, to all of the developers and the AI scientists, the inner workings of that intelligence and the way that it fires through those patterns remains somewhat of a black box. So the second principle of the chinchilla scaling law is that knowledge is far lighter than raw data. So knowledge is a compressed, more efficient version of data. And that means that the models can consume vast amounts of data and compress it into something that's much smaller and more useful and easier to store. So a good way to describe this in a layman analogy is with a library analogy. So imagine assembling the world's largest library containing every book ever written. The storage requirement would be massive, hundreds of thousands of warehouses filled to the ceiling. And AI could consume that data in those books in a matter of weeks. And instead of storing the raw data in that massive volume, it would build a new store of only patterns and associations. So how each book relates to each other, how the themes connect, how the words connect, how the concepts interlink. The AI then stores this requirement in a dramatically reduced fashion. So instead of thousands of warehouses, all of that knowledge could effectively be compressed into the space of a single warehouse. Those patterns and associations are what we call parameters. So you'll often hear the term in AI discussion of parameters, and that is how AI retains knowledge in parameters. Thousands of gigabytes of data can be distilled into just a few gigabytes of parameters. And this is very similar to how the human brain works, actually. So we don't actually store raw data in vast quantities. We store patterns and associations that we're able to generate recollection and fill in the blanks. Of course, the human brain is prone to forgetting connections or even fabricating real memory into false ones. Sorry, won't you guys mute there? There we go. Yeah, so the human brain is prone to forgetting connections or even fabrications, or creating fabrications into real memory. AI retains patterns indefinitely, unlike the human brain, but it does also suffer from misreading patterns, and that results in the same ability to fabricate fact and answers. So this compression of data was actually how this presentation originally came about. I was demonstrating a new application called Enclave to a few of our customers. And Enclave, when I first saw it, kind of blew my mind a little. I'll send you a link straight after the session so that you can download the application, but that is effectively what it looks like. Oops, go back one. So Enclave is a direct result of AI's incredible scaling laws. So it's an entirely offline AI agent. It's like a mini ChatGPT, if you will. What makes Enclave unique, together with the other ones that are playing in this space, is that unlike large language models, it's a SML, a small language model that can run isolated on your phone, so with no external connection at all. Enclave, this particular version that I'm running, is trained on over 3 billion parameters or knowledge points. Now, that's actually a tiny artificial intelligence engine. But to put 3 billion parameters into perspective, that's roughly the equivalent of the knowledge contained in more than 150,000 books. So far more than any one person would ever consume in their lifetime. And yet the size of this AI model with over 3 billion parameters is just over 3 gigabytes on your phone. So that effectively means that it can run on even the most entry-level smartphones anywhere in the world. The potential impact, as I'm sure you can imagine, is enormous. So, for example, a child without access to schools or libraries or even the internet would be able to learn almost any subject from an AI that's sitting right on their device. In the business world, a staff member working in a remote location with no connection would be able to still access all the guidelines and knowledge that they need to be able to do their role. And because the model can be trained specifically in their environment to support them, but it's entirely offline. Better still, the model continues to learn and grow and adapt as your business evolves, and you can certainly develop it in that way. And then every time it connects back to its source model, when it does have connectivity, it's able to update that inference and understand that environment that much better. Now, to be clear, these offline models are not anywhere near the same scale as your ChatGPT and your Perplexity and Grok or any of the other big players, but they do deliver incredible democratization of intelligence without the need for internet access or access to larger AI models. So these offline models, they can be trained, very broadly up front. So that's that 3 billion parameters that are sitting inside it. It's effectively a very broad understanding of the world and a bunch of data like Wikipedia, etc. And once it is trained in that model, it can be specifically enhanced in your own business and industry. So putting knowledge directly into the hands of anyone that needs it, even while disconnected. So these models can provide trained guidance and information to that personnel. For example, and I've just got a video here. So a couple of neighboring farmers are checking on their fields far out of reach of any internet connection. One of the farmers finds diseased crops, and while entirely offline, is able to use the trained AI models to immediately diagnose the disease or pests that are affecting the crops and the required treatment. So this is already having a massive impact on insurance costs and loss prevention, with companies like Amini, who support small-scale farming throughout Africa, that are currently using this technology. Early warning, faster treatment, immediate notification of neighboring farms so that they can do their treatment proactively as well. Another example is Appo, which is a prominent smartphone maker who've released a device that is able to integrate SLMs into Gemini, and that'll learn specifics about your world, including the model of your vehicle. So it would give you step-by-step guides on replacing a blown tire, even when you're entirely offline. Mining companies using small language models to effect repairs on specific underground equipment in zero connectivity environments, and handling health and safety guidance whilst entirely offline as well. So these models can be very impactful with remote and unreliable connectivity, high safety or compliance risk, real-time troubleshooting, on-site decision-making, strict data privacy requirements, things like that. Just as a side note, you might have picked up that all of the images and video in this presentation were created by artificial intelligence. This particular video, we actually had made a separate one for a customer. We customized it to their business, so it had all their business branding and all that kind of stuff. So I had to put a new one together for this presentation. And this particular one took me about 15 minutes to put together. It's 100% generated by an AI model called Nano Banana, another very unusual name. But that's actually Google's Gemini Flash version of AI. So nothing existed prior to that. It was all of these videos and images were generated from scratch, and they were also not guided. This was entirely from short text prompts that I put together to create them. We actually, about 2 years ago, had an agency put together a short promotional video for us. It was roughly the same length. It cost us 85,000 Rand. And trust me, I have zero design skills. I was still able to do this in approximately 15 minutes, and it cost me all of 38 South African rand, so roughly $2. If we have a little bit of time at the end, I'll do some demonstrations for you guys on some of the models that we've been playing around with, just so that you guys can wrap your heads around it if you haven't already. But you can very clearly see that in 15 minutes and 38 rand, what someone with the skills would be able to achieve in a couple of hours and maybe 1,000 rands worth of spend is unbelievably powerful. And there's no, I think there's a lot of the industry that question whether this will have a fundamental impact on a lot of industries. I cannot fathom how anyone thinks that it wouldn't. It really is going to make a dramatic difference to those environments as well. So a step beyond these AI chatbot capabilities that we're talking about is what's called agentification. So that broadly means autonomously creating agents that are autonomous goal directed actions by AI agents. So building agents inside your business that are intelligent and autonomous. They make decisions based on the criteria that you've given them, and they'll be able to do that on an ongoing basis 24/7. The tools that we use to build these engines for our customers are mainly in the machine learning space and Microsoft's Copilot Studio, which is a license probably everyone in this room already has, and if you don't, something that we can switch on very easily for you on the Microsoft tenant. But before anyone builds and deploys AI agents in their environments, we always emphasize how important it is to prepare your environment up front so that it is able to very powerfully deliver the AI experience that you want. The risks of not preparing your environments far outweigh the benefits of deploying AI if done incorrectly. So this is just a quick summary of what we would typically prepare in a customer's business prior to deploying AI. This example is obviously using Microsoft's tenant as the foundation, but the principle across platforms remains the same regardless of the technology that you choose to adopt. So data storage and governance is probably the area where we started first. Store data in compliant regions so that those regions obviously have access to the right information. Classifying information with Microsoft Purview labels, so what is confidential, what is internal, what is public, and how those can be shared. Applying retention and deletion rules, consolidating files into managed cloud storage. Cloud storage is one of the aspects, certainly if you're on Microsoft's environment or any of the cloud-based artificial intelligence platforms, it is really important that your data resides in those cloud platforms. Obviously, both from a latency and processing perspective, it's really important that they're accessible in those environments directly. Far more risky and far more difficult to deploy if it includes local storage as well. The second biggest aspect, data access and permissions, so applying least privilege. So there's no broad, everyone has access or autonomous access. We use sensitivity labels to control what Copilot can show. There's certain information that you probably don't ever want Copilot to be able to access, and those type of things need to be taken into consideration. Identity and access, so that is using Microsoft's Entra ID capabilities. That's the likes of enforcing MFA for all users, applying conditional access to, based on location and devices, minimizing global admins. Global admins is one of the things like there's a lot of different ways to manage global admin, but we do come across a lot of environments where customers' own email address that they use on a daily basis is what they use for the username to their global admin access. And, you obviously want to not have that email address that you're using exposed. We use a randomly generated email address that doesn't exist in the outside world to be able to log on to those environments. And then there's obviously a lot of cross control where if I'm trying to log in as global admin, I have to have two other people authenticating me in the organization. So a lot of those rule sets to be able to manage identity and access in those environments. Devices and endpoints, so that's Microsoft's Intune that we typically use on these platforms. So that's enrolling all of the corporate devices, requiring the likes of encryption and antivirus and updates, and protecting company information regardless of where it may reside, even if it's on bring your own device. Licensing and enablement. So that confirms that users do have the right licensing and the right Copilot licensing for their environments. Power Platform licenses for Copilot Studio if they're developing in that space. Then very importantly, security, privacy, and compliance. So that's enabling the likes of purview audits and e-discovery, configuring information barriers, so separating different departments from each other and being able to create barriers where Copilot can't see beyond them if they're not authenticated to do so, turning on data loss protection for sensitive data, and the rule sets around how artificial intelligence can interact with your data as well. So obviously, it will be able to find data. It's up to you whether you allow it to start modifying data, and the risk in doing so as well. And then user compliance management for monitoring users. And then finally, organizational change and training. So that's really defining policies on responsible AI use. This is another area where we've often spoken to customers about shadow IT, and the power of potential environments in shadow IT as well as the risks. But this is one of the areas of shadow IT that you need to be very disciplined and very stringent on from a business perspective. The rule sets around which AI platforms can be used for content creation, which in honesty is most of them, just don't always trust the output. But the risk comes in where you start manipulating and uploading your own data. And obviously within Microsoft's environment, the likes of Copilot retain that upload only within your tenant. They don't share it with the models. They don't share it for additional training on those models. If you're doing that with the likes of ChatGPT or Perplexity, you are uploading information that those models are learning. So there is a risk in exposing that data. And it's why it's very important to build those policies and controls around what artificial intelligence your staff is authorized to use and what they're not authorized to use. And then obviously lots of staff training on security and the correct use of Copilot. We'll go into a little bit of detail a little later around the different kinds of Copilots and the right way to use them. And then obviously making sure that there's a lot of very interactive feedback from the use of artificial intelligence from the users. This is basically step one in terms of making sure that your environment is ready. Without these checks and balances in place, we would never recommend deploying any level of artificial intelligence inside a business, because its ability to learn and understand and start working with an environment is pretty close to instantaneous. And the power of it being able to source information in environments is significant. So these basic fundamentals are really important to get in place up front. Mel, do we have any questions so far that are coming through on the chat?
None so far.
Okay, so if you guys do remember, you either make your own notes, but you're welcome to pop it into the chat as well if there's anything that you want to ask, and we'll attend to those questions during the preso. So once your environment is ready, then your custom agents can be deployed. We engage with a lot of businesses regarding their AI strategy and the type of agents and deployments that they want to deliver. The obvious thing about these deployments is that the people who know AI's impact best are always our customers. You're in the business of knowing your business inside out. So, the technology is most powerful when deployed around our customers' context. So it's not actually true to say that technology partners roll out AI for their customers. It would be more accurate to say that technology partners help prepare your environment for AI and build the tools for AI to use effectively in that context. The AI itself is not something that any of us build. It's already done. Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Grok, Perplexity, and many others have already built the raw models that are significantly more powerful than most of the stuff that us mere mortals would be able to build. So once we deploy AI readiness and ensure that your permissions are accurate and the AI and machine learning is trained on the right context, the next step is switching your agents on and thoroughly testing their capability. Testing is vitally important. as those of you who were raising your hands earlier, playing around with models know, they these models are not 100% accurate. They can sway quite dramatically sometimes from the truth. So the information outputs need to be checked and double checked and tweaked as you go along. And because these agents are fundamentally built to work and understand natural language within your environments, enhancing these agents actually becomes far more scalable in your business. Your users will literally be able to use natural language in order to tweak the outputs that they require on the environment as well. From there, it's actually quite easy to start linking AI agents together. So they start feeding off the information that each other are generating and the actions and outputs that they're processing. So one feeding outputs into another. You do normally want to keep these outputs pretty bite-sized. We'll go into the reasons why, but artificial intelligence, these LLMs, the large language models, they work very well with chunks of data. But and when I say chunks, like small volumes of data, when you start getting into mass volumes of data and databases and huge spreadsheets and things like that, you actually start needing to bring in other capabilities from an intelligence perspective, not just the LLMs themselves. So we've got a dedicated team of our own engineers that assist companies in building agents for their businesses. And there are probably as many applications for agents as there are jobs to be done in an organization. Our take on artificial intelligence is that at least for the next couple of years, it's all about enhancing jobs as much as possible. There is, of course, potential, and that'll be sometime in the future, very likely, for significant impact to existing types of jobs. Our customers often ask us about our kind of take on that. That's just the reality of this type of technology if it continues to accelerate and improve as predicted. But that acute level of impact to jobs across industries, in our opinion, is still some time away. So for the moment, it really is about enhancing existing capabilities and being able to scale a lot more in organizations. Some practical examples of agents from inside our own business. We're busy using Copilot Studio to build dozens of agents that provide information back to the business and enhancing our team's ability to do their jobs more effectively. I think importantly, and I'll just bring it up here, you'll hear the word Copilot used very loosely when talking about Microsoft's AI capabilities. There are essentially 4 versions of Copilot that are available in Microsoft's environment. So there is Copilot or Web Copilot. That's the free version. Everyone will have that. So that's a general AI chatbot that's available to all Microsoft users and very similar to the ChatGPT interface, if you're familiar with that. The second one is Copilot for Microsoft 365. That is a paid dedicated license per user. It costs roughly 7,000 or 8,000 Rand a year per user. And that Copilot is deeply integrated into the likes of the applications. So Word, Excel, Teams, Outlook, PowerPoint, etc. The third one is called Copilot Studio. That is tenant-based. So that's used to build those custom AI agents I was talking about. It'll help build workflows, connectors, memory, orchestration, all of those different aspects. So that really is probably the most powerful out of all of them in terms of building entry-level agents. Azure AI and Azure OpenAI Copilots, that is the fourth and I suppose the most powerful one. So that is custom copilots that are built on Azure infrastructure using the GPT models. And that really builds in custom orchestration, vector search, allows for API plugins for data to come from different sources and things like that. So that's really when you start using Microsoft's environment to deploy custom agents that are built for bigger environments and sourcing data from different sources. It'll be the Azure platforms that you'll be using. For producing everyday agents for your business, so that's doing general tasks and replacing a lot of the automation that you'd like in your business, it's number 3 that is the most powerful and the most cost effective. I stand to be corrected. I think Copilot Studio is roughly $200 US per month per tenant. And then obviously users are able to access it if they've got the right permissions. There are certain limitations to it. I think it's 25,000 tokens on a monthly basis. And then obviously if you use more tokens, you need to, you'll pay for the usage of those tokens as well. But that is a very powerful platform, very robust. And just as a heads up, the Copilot for Microsoft 365, so number 2, that one that's deeply integrated with Word, Excel, Teams, etc. There is a Copilot agent builder in that module. We have tested it many, many times. It is not great. It's going to take you down, not a great path in terms of building agents because it's quite limiting. So you can't customize a lot of the requirements if you're using Copilot for Microsoft 365. You also can't share those agents that you build unless the people you're sharing it with also have Copilot for M365. That is why Copilot Studio number 3 is so much more powerful. You can build a ton of agents, you can customize them an immense amount, and you'll be able to share them with whomever you want. You can literally share them right down to WhatsApp and websites and internal pages and whatever you want to. It's a far more powerful platform to utilize. So our latest projects that we've just started. I see we've got one hand shooting up. Colin, did you want to add something there?
I thought maybe it's a good time. Vimpy asked a question about practical examples of agents we've built ourselves, and it looks like you might actually be getting onto it. But if you weren't, I thought it was a nice moment to just to tell them.
Excellent, thank you. Vimpy, this is an example of one. We've got quite a few others, and I think maybe if we've got time at the end or in a separate session, we can take you through some of the live ones that we've got. Our latest project, and we've actually just kicked this one off, is a sentiment agent. So we've connected this to our tenants' email infrastructure. It's being built to scour all incoming emails in our business and understand if there is a negative or concerning sentiment that's included in the language. So whether it's an upset customer, lack of response, a delayed quotation, anything along those lines that would be flagged and communicated up the chain. So senior managers would be notified whilst it's one of the important aspects of this. When you think about it, something scouring through all of the emails in your organization sounds like a huge breach in privacy, not least of which a whole bunch of other things. But the way that these agents work is very clever. So they don't actually release any of the core information or a screenshot of the email itself. They purely look for sentiment. So their only output is the sentiment of the email. It'll say something along the lines of, Mike is upset that the quote has taken longer than expected. Recommendation is to get a hold of him as soon as possible to let him know that you're on top of it. So the rest of the information, you will still need to engage with the account managers or the project team or the support team who are involved, but it purely understands sentiment. And this is one of the areas where Copilot and the LLMs are incredibly powerful. They're not super powerful in the space of calculations and trigonometry and things like that. They'll make a lot of mistakes in those areas as LLMs. But from a language perspective, their understanding of context is exceptional. And then you can obviously have escalation paths where directors will have permanent oversight of anything that has not been actioned within a specific time frame. And it really does bring it removes a significant amount of human error and oversight in that equation, just hunting for the sentiment across the board. So, I think it's irresponsible the number of technology businesses out there that trivialize the risks and dangers associated with AI deployment in businesses. If not correctly managed, the stuff is pretty dangerous. We heard a story not long ago about a very early AI adopters in the States, a financial firm that decided to deploy a full Copilot rollout for all of their staff. This was at the end of 2023, in order to be the most progressive and cutting edge in their industry. After purchasing the licenses for all of their staff and switching on the capabilities, one of their junior admin staff was playing with Copilot and tested a simple question. can you send me the CEO's salary slip? And seconds later, she was presented with both the HR records as well as the SharePoint store versions of the CEO's salary information and benefits. Having successfully done that, her next query delivered the company's entire payroll, the company's financials, income statements, even agenda notes from board meetings. So this particular company was lucky. The junior admin was not malicious at all. She immediately took the information to the directors, and they subsequently shut down the AI deployment. But it turns out that junior admin, quite a few months before, had been given a higher level of access to the tenant to build some reports for the business, and IT had never removed that higher level. So her access remained in place when they deployed the Copilot. Now, she had the access for over 6 months, but if you don't know where to find information, it would obviously be very difficult to go searching for it. With artificial intelligence, it is instantaneous. AI learns that environment end to end, and if you are deemed to have the right credentials, it'll service and tell you anything that you need to know. So that's a very real example of the potential dangers. The other dangers are the likes of bad actors being able to breach actual AI agents in an environment. So it's why one of the biggest aspects of artificial intelligence is definitely going to be the security based on locking these environments down. There are some bigger challenges with AI overall. Since we all rely on these very large models, we're incorporating a lot of the models from the market like Google and Meta and all of them into our environments. So I just want to add a little bit more context to that idea that artificial intelligence is not built or deployed, it's grown. So, we know that even developers of these AI systems don't know how these models work. If you unlock it, it's not possible for any human to be able to understand the neural patterns that AI builds. It's very similar to baking a cake. So with a certain recipe, the combination of the ingredients that goes into the cake and what temperature to heat it at. But once it's baked, you can't slice it open, point at an area of the sponge and say that's where the egg is. The egg is actually no longer there. It's become something else in the process of being cooked. So, the same as every cake you bake is going to be unique. Every one of these models that are grown is very unique in its own right as well. And if you were to open an AI's pattern of parameters, which is essentially its brain, if you were to, open up those areas of the AI and look inside, it looks very much like the image that you're seeing now. So trillions of randomly placed numbers that effectively adapt and alter pathways constantly. It is impossible for humans to read or understand. We don't know why it does this, but the AI fires a path across these number associations in order to understand our language, to understand our instructions, and to choose what it wants to do with that information. So how it works is a black box to all AI scientists, and that poses a significant threat, obviously, in the control of more and more powerful agents. That's why you'll see AI safety is likely to be one of the most important jobs in the coming decade, and one that ethically can't be outsourced to anyone other than a human, definitely not to AI. So in closing, once you start building more and more artificial intelligence, you'll notice that hallucinations can become a big part of its makeup. For the most part, it'll be very accurate and factual, but on occasion, it will flat out lie to you. So it will tell you something that is completely false and fabricated. There is a recent white paper that I pulled out on the research by OpenAI, covering this exact topic. It was actually published about a month ago in early October, and it explains that very similar to students facing difficult exams, LLMs sometimes guess or creatively fabricate plausible yet inaccurate statements instead of admitting uncertainty. That is what a hallucination is. And they exist in all of the state-of-the-art models in the world. Obviously, the biggest challenge with it is that it does undermine trust. So AI scientists best guess, and again, they're guessing because they can't really open it up and understand how the hallucination happens, but they guess that all AI models do this because statistically, the likelihood of guessing the answer is far greater than admitting that they don't know the answer. So these models are trained and rewarded on getting things right, and therefore guessing gives a slim chance of success versus admitting that they don't know, which is guaranteed failure. So the scientific community's solution to this in the white paper comes in 3 stages. So firstly, change evaluations so that models get credit for uncertainty. Secondly, penalize confident errors more than abstentions. And thirdly, reward honesty through knowledge over plausible bluffing. So this could be potentially the next biggest positive change in AI and trust, and is likely to be a profound improvement on the future models that are coming out of the likes of Microsoft and Google, etc. Right. I mean, I think if I were to give an overall summary of AI today, these models are already incredibly powerful. They are close, possibly months away, not more than a year away, I would imagine, from exponential value in the business sectors as well as in the world in general. But until then, it is crucial for businesses to explore their existing capabilities, understand their value as well as their shortcomings. I think understanding and building these agents inside your environments, even whilst they're ironing out the hallucinations and accuracy, is definitely going to shape your business's understanding and how to pivot when the technology really starts to mature. I want to quickly, I mean, we actually had, I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, I think. Colin, you've got your hand up.
Do you mind if I share some of the stuff we're doing? Again, you said if we've got time at the end, Vimpy asked the question about practical examples.
Yeah, that's great. I want to quickly show one last 5-second video. I was actually asked by a customer recently. He said to me, "Am I worried about the potential Terminator problem?" And I sent him this video, which I want to play for you guys. This was launched on the 11th of November, so I think only a couple of days ago. And it was by a renowned robotics company in Russia, who stitched their narrow AI language models together with movement and robotics models to create this. And it kind of shows how close we are to what they call general artificial intelligence. So let's see if it plays for you guys. Surprise the face, talks about the people going on. Only child. A man decides after 70 years. That's why. So I love how they also try and cover it with the fallen robot with the sheet. Like that's going to improve the situation. So that was just obviously it looks like we're still a little bit away from that kind of situation. But thank you all, and I think we're going to cut over to Colin to quickly show us some practical examples, and then we will move on to the tasting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Brian. I'm not going to show anyone. I just thought to quickly talk about them.
Sure.
One agent that we've built, actually, Melissa, who runs these events and is in charge of all of our sort of digital stuff, has created, and she's not a programmer. I think that's the point I want to make. Has created one of our bots that we've got a couple of businesses, as some of you know, that looks at the policies and procedures, HR stuff for each business, and the employees in the business can query the bot to ask certain questions, which might not be obvious if you just look at a policy. So, for instance, I've only got 2.5 days of leave available. I want to go for a 4-day holiday in December. Is that allowed? How do I go about applying for it? Because the system says that I can't. And our bot looks at the business's rules around that stuff. It uses a bit of fuzzy logic because it's not maybe that obvious, and it answers the people appropriately. That's for we've got the bot can answer about password complexity. It can answer about encryption standards. It can do anything that comes from any of our policies. So it's a chat bot that is trained on our own unique data. Another example is some of you know that our sister company is Dial-A-Nerd. We've created a bot on the website, which you can go to right now. It does free IT support. So, as many of you will know, that's Dial-A-Nerd's core business. But we took the decision that a bunch of the stuff can be done quite easily with the bot. So we've made it available in the hope that customers will solve some of their problems with the bot. But when they can't, they'll escalate it and book a real technician to help. It does that as well. So like I said, you can go to the Dial-A-Nerd website right now, and there's a bot on there which will help you with a printer jam, or if your Wi-Fi is not working. And if you need to book a technician, it will also help you do that. So very practical examples that non-programmers in our businesses created. And we're sort of coming up with a couple of these every single month to give you an idea. Procurement, requisition orders, you name it, we can make agents almost for free that help streamline the process and make it easier to complete.
Thanks, Colin. Great. We've got another question here from Arnold. As AI systems consume massive data sets, how are organizations ensuring that proprietary data stays ring-fenced and isn't unintentionally merged with external data sets, risking exposure of sensitive insights or intellectual property? Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the biggest concerns that organizations have with artificial intelligence. I think there's a couple of things to cover there. The first is, there are a lot of different environments that you can use to make sure that your data is ring-fenced. A lot of these local models or models that sit inside Microsoft's environment are actually ring-fenced on the data within your tenant. It is why we're very insistent on the data, A, existing there in the first place, and B, there being a huge amount of rule sets that it can't be extracted from there into other AI environments. Arnold, you're kind of spot on with a concern. Like anyone right now who is using artificial intelligence platforms like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Grok, if they're using those platforms to read and understand and alter company documents and information, your information absolutely is being shared with these models. And to what extent only the developers of those models will be able to share that. But the reality is you are exposing your business to risk by doing so. So it is why managing access to documents and locking down access to artificial intelligence environments in your organization is critical, as well as training of staff in terms of the rules of what they can and can't use. As an example, in our business, we have a policy that covers two areas. One is content creation, and one is data manipulation and data consumption. And data consumption and manipulation can only come from Copilot. So that's only from within the Microsoft tenant. When it comes to content creation, so not uploading anything at all, but creating it from scratch, we've got a couple of the AIs that are actually approved for that, like the likes of ChatGPT, etc. But there it is just creating content. And again, that content, we always encourage that you don't just immediately accept the output, because very often those outputs, can be misleading, sometimes at best. And then another one, will AI this is a very interesting one from Michael. Will AI continue in English? Is AI English-based? Will language English change due to AI? That's actually a fascinating question. The thing that I've definitely learned around AI is that it is incredible at language, all language. If you expose an AI to enough content in any language, it will very quickly become, extremely fluent in that language. And it's one of the things that a lot of the AI developers found very unusual at the beginning. They would build a model, for example, to be brilliant at math. So they'd give it all these math models from around the world, all of these calculations and all of these white papers on mathematical equations. But what they found is that amongst all of that data, some of those math models were in Spanish, Some of those models were in Portuguese. Some of them were in Afrikaans, as an example. And as soon as they introduced those models in other languages, the AI started learning language, in some cases better than the math that it was producing. So the intention, and that's why we talk about that cooking of that growing of AI. Like very often, AI scientists would put together a model, they'd train it for 7 months, and they'd find it was brilliant at math. And then someone would ask a question in another language, and they found that it was fluent in kind of 30 languages, and it was only good at 2 areas of math. So it really does deviate from its primary requirement quite often, and it's one of the things that the developers are trying to wrap their heads around is how do we what else can these models do that we don't know that they can do, because they never asked that model to learn language. They asked that model to learn math. It decided to learn language in order to expand its understanding of math on those papers. Colin, you want to add there?
Yeah, I just read, Michael's raised a good point. As you say, I just read an article about 2 students that have created something they call Gibberlink, which is, they did this during a hackathon, or they discovered it during a hackathon, and now they're trying to make it a real thing, which is that AIs speaking to AIs can switch to what they call a different protocol, but basically it's a different language. So in other words, if you have your AI phoning a hotel to make a booking for you, there's a trigger that both AIs know that they're speaking to an AI, and then they switch to Gibberlink, and it's 80% faster for AIs to speak to each other using Gibberlink than it is using English. So they're trying to sell this now and monetize it. But you could have a situation where your AI is booking flights or booking hotels or ordering a sandwich, and it's speaking to another AI in a language that none of us will ever understand.
I also, just to add to that, I know, and it's the second part of your question there, Michael, will language change due to AI? I absolutely believe that it will, but that's not like, and I'll see if I can find the article for you. There's a couple companies around the world that are developing these earbuds that have integrated AI from a language perspective built in, and I think they've got up to 15 or 20 languages integrated at the moment. But effectively, if you're in a foreign country, like you're in Paris, you wear the earbuds and you're able to speak to someone, and their reply to you, it'll translate into the language. And when you reply to them, if they've got the same earbuds, you can just kind of cross over, but it'll also tell you how to respond to them in their language. So it'll very slowly tell you the words in your ear, and you'd be able to effectively respond to them. So that type of technology is at a very, very early stage at the moment. There's latency issues, and there's obviously the extent of languages that you can translate. But I think the point of this technology is that where we are, these companies are already building prototypes now. Within 18 months, realistically, that technology is going to be almost seamless. So I think, to answer the second part of your question, there is no doubt in my mind that artificial intelligence is going to dramatically change language, because it's just going to open up the world in an entirely different way that we haven't seen before. Right. We've got some articles posted there as well for you guys to look at. I'll also share that link that goes to Enclave and the other entirely offline applications. Any other questions before we cut over to Sean and the liqueur tasting? Just feel free to raise your virtual hand. You're welcome to ask it in the group. And if not, I think it is time to cut over. Sean, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Excellent. Are you ready to roll?
Oh, I've got a bit of a dirty screen, dirty camera. I'm ready to roll.
Brilliant. Thank you, kind sir.
Hope everybody else is.
To you.
Thanks,
I
Brian.
think we are. Thanks, Sean.
All right, so welcome to the dessert part of the day. This is